Well, now to breaking news in Baghdad. U.S. troops firing tear gas to disperse crowds gathered for a second day at the U.S. Embassy after supporters of pro-Iranian militias broke into the compound. They set fires in a reception area yesterday, amongst some other things. President Trump putting Iran on notice for the violence. Iran will be held fully responsible for lives lost or damage incurred at any of our facilities. They will pay a very big price. This is not a warning. It is a threat. Happy New Year. And joining me now is retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis, now a senior fellow and military expert at Defense Priorities. Thank you so much for joining me again. And Happy New Year officially.
Thanks for having me.
You know, I spoke with you about some of this yesterday. Now we're into a second day of continued protest. Is the United States, is President Trump and his administration making the right moves?
Well, you know, I honestly think, based on all the things that are going on here, and especially on the government of Baghdad's response to a lot of this and how they have not done a very good job in protecting our diplomatic personnel, this ought to be the last straw that the American people finally just say, hey, it's time for us to redeploy our troops out of there. Because here's the key thing for Americans to understand is, first, there is no threat to American security that these troops are there to protect. Their primary benefactor is Baghdad. They were sent there in 2014 at the height of the rise of the ISIS people at the defense of the government of Baghdad. And I think it's time for us to come home, because all we're doing is having targets put on our back, and it's increasing the threat to our troops over there.
Yeah, earlier we spoke with Dan Hoffman, who is now a Fox News contributor, former CIA station chief in Moscow, Iraq, Pakistan. He talked about Iran's influence in all of this. Listen.
They hold a lot of influence. Now, it's not over yet. The United States, I think, should be doubling down on our diplomacy with the government of Iraq and finding appropriate Iraqi leaders with whom to work. But make no mistake, the battle for Iraq's future carries on and is certainly a great challenge for us.
Yeah. So you mentioned you believe that we should pull the troops out right now. We have, what, approximately 5,000 U.S. troops there now?
Right. That's correct. And to his point there, you also see just how chaotic it is, because prior to all of this, these sanctions, I mean, all of these people rising up against the United States here, there were a great deal of protest for months now against the government of Baghdad because of the Iranian influence. And that's one of probably the most effective way to move Iraq away from the Iranian sphere of influence by their own people who are tired of that. But we don't need to provide the military backstop and increase the risk that we may have a clash with Iran, because that would not serve our interests at all.
Yeah, this follows 11 attacks in just the last 2 months at Iraqi bases, housing U.S. contractors. That's in addition to the U.S. contractor who was killed this past Friday. In terms of who these protesters are, lots of people upset, lots of veterans today, when you had, I think, one of the media organizations, perhaps the New York Times, referring to these protesters as Iraqi mourners. Here is what Morgan Ortagus from the State Department had to say about who these protesters are earlier.
This was not protesters. These were terrorists that are organized, trained, and equipped by the Iranian regime. We have had threats to our embassy, which the secretary has discussed. We went to Iraq over the summer to address some of these threats with the government of Iraq. You'll probably remember that we actually went on ordered departure for a while at the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad.
So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I mean, the fact is, I mean, they probably are mourning the loss of their personnel, because they are primarily from what they call Hashd al-Shabi, which are paramilitary units that are Iran-backed. No question about that. But these are Iraqi citizens. They're not Iranian citizens. And that just is part of the complications here, because we have attacked on Iraqi soil Iraqi citizens that were in the process, or that were in the control of the Iraqi government. So it's a real chaotic situation here, and that just further underscores why we need to withdraw our troops that and not get in the middle of all this stuff.
But would that put those people left behind in further danger?
Well, if you're referring to the people like in the U.S. Embassy, we absolutely need to maintain a very robust embassy security staff, and that's beyond question. But I'm talking about like just the 5,000 that are spread around the country, like in Taji and some of the other places in Kirkuk. That does nothing for American interest, and we need to reduce our strategic risk.
And that is something that President Trump has campaigned on. He's talked about bringing our troops home in places like this all over the country, including the world, including Afghanistan.
Right, and honestly, as we head into 2020, the people are going to be paying a little bit more attention to that. And the last thing we want to see, and the last thing I think voters want to see, is us getting into potentially another war with Iran, because that would be far worse than anything we've had in the last number of years. And I think Trump is right into pulling us back from that. And I hope that's where he goes with this, to reduce our strategic risk, not increasing it.
Yeah, it's interesting because you hear the opposite in terms of some Democratic candidates for 2020 speaking out, saying that the president is making the wrong moves and he's just escalating the situation. Compare his decision, what he's done here, with the Obama administration for us.
Well, I think that the things we have to focus on here is beyond just the politics, because I think, especially in an election year, you can expect both sides to use anything they can to damage the other side. But President Trump has been very firm in defending American interest, putting American interest first, which I strongly endorse, because that's why I say we should withdraw our troops. But he will defend us no matter what, and he's not going to allow a situation, especially like what happened in Benghazi, to where American personnel were killed because of the slowness of the defense response, and that's not going to happen here.
What is Iran trying to get out of this?
Well, the big problem with this, and a lot of people say, hey, the maximum pressure campaign is succeeding. Well, the only thing it's succeeding in doing is making Iran more provocative and making them move towards more risky situations. If we really do want to negotiate a better deal to end that situation here, we have to be willing for Iran to come out with something like a win. Otherwise, you won't have any negotiations, and these kinds of things are going to continue on. And again, that's just not in our interest to do that.
Wait, what does that mean? We need for Iran to be able to come out with a win.
Right. If you're going to negotiate something, both sides have to get something that they want. And that means that we can't just say everything that we want is going to happen, you're just going to do it, because they're just not going to operate that way. No one will do that. So we have to say, what are your requirements and what are your needs? And we have to give them something. Because, look, be honest, if they don't get anything that's a win, what is their motivation to do what we want them to do?
Yeah, we also remember, what was it, over this past summer, they attacked the oil tankers in the Gulf. They shot down the U.S. drone. We have sanctions underway right now that are hurting their economy. Thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us.
Always my pleasure. Thanks.
All right.
Great interview, great perspectives.